Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and today I'm going to be doing a video on the Blackout. However, this is going to be a bit more of a loose video than my normal sort of content, and that's because, the Blackout hasn't been going on long enough for us to get a real good picture of how this is going to impact EVE going forwards, if it does stay going forwards. So what I've decided to do instead is to show off some of the footage that I've been able to get, personally trying to PvP and do things whilst the Blackout's been in effect. When we get later on in this video, you're going to see some footage of me attempting to solo PvP, and more accurately attempting to hunt and kill PvE targets in their anomalies. And I just want to warn you to not take that as like an educational or instructional video of how you should do that, because it's something that I'm notoriously bad at and I haven't ever really been good at before now. I just wanted to see how the lack of local really impacted that area of the game for myself, rather than relying on what other people told me. Before we get onto the solo PvP part of this video though, we're going to take a look at the one major fight that I've managed to get during the Blackout, which was with Spectre Fleet running a small Vexor fleet. And my intent was basically just to run around their space and see what I could catch in order to force a fight, as I assumed that people were going to be a lot more laissez-faire about gating. And that ended up being proven true pretty much immediately, as one of my scouts managed to tackle a Rorqual a few jumps away from where we were, leading to us just rushing to that location. And whilst we absolutely lacked the DPS to kill this Pandemic Horde Rorqual, what we were able to do was just to hold it in place and let all these people who were just trying to randomly save it warp into us and, immediately die to our blob of drones, and that was great fun. As it seems without local, people don't really recognise how big of a threat might be tackling down a Rorqual, so, it just reported that it was tackled by a specific thing, and people seemed to think that that was the only thing on grid, and then warped in to try and save it by killing that little frigate, and ended up dying to all our Vexors. And that just shows how much, a lack of quick defensive intel can help you get kills. And after that intel properly got relayed back to Pandemic Horde, they started to drop a lot of bigger stuff, and we saw a Wyvern and a Thanatos land on top of us, but thankfully we were able to defang it pretty quickly using our drones, and I put someone in the fleet in charge of broadcasting them if they dropped more. Again, these capitals are something that really wasn't worth primering, as they were obviously going to be able to tank pretty much any DPS we put out, and if they even had one or two smart bombs, that would be the end of us being able to put out DPS in the first place. So we just kept putting DPS on the Rorqual and kept pressuring its tank a little bit in order to try and get it to cry for more help, and waited to see how the fight would further escalate. And escalate it absolutely did, as only a couple of minutes later we saw a relatively ragtag and probably hastily formed home defense fleet warp on top of us. And here I think is actually where we start to see the power of local not existing actually start to turn around and favour the defender instead of the attacker. Because at this point I could have very easily disengaged, but I chose not to because the threat that I saw on grid was relatively light, and it was probably something we could fight and get a lot of kills doing so. But if local had been working, I'd have been able to see the spike of roughly 50 more people as a Triumvirate and Slice Brotix Navy issue fleet entered the system, and that would have probably made me want to disengage from that fight rather than get locked down here. And as you can see, they pretty quickly got sabers on top of us and forced us to stay in this fight. And whilst I was able to kill a few sabers as we went down, that's something that Vexors do really good at generally, we ended up dying pretty quickly to just the overwhelming DPS and force that was now on grid. But I want to emphasise that I don't think that that's bad. It's actually really cool that people can trap you and you can't just stay in one location for a significant amount of time, because you're not going to know if someone's getting ready to jump on top of you and kill you like this. Unless, of course, you actually try and adapt to this new intel landscape, and that's something that I think, personally, I'm going to have a lot of fun trying to do. It's going to put a lot of value onto manual scouting. You're going to want to have, people watching every single gate of a system, you're going to want to have people watching every Ansiblex gate in the system. I might even put someone literally just in charge of spamming D-scan to let me know if new ships are arriving. In the short term, the only major downside that I've really experienced is that once people realise that you are a threat, they just react to you with the maximum amount of force that they can possibly bring to bear. Dropping supers and titans on you, bringing massive fleets that vastly outnumber you. But, I'm going to be interested in seeing if that ends up being sustainable, or if people start to burn out from running that many home defence fleets. But overall, it didn't really have the negative impact on FCing that I expected it to. I expected it to be really, really hard to find fights in this kind of paradigm where you can't tell where people are, people don't know that you're in a system, you have to camp a gate for a long time. But in reality, it's generally become a lot easier because you can just run out there and find something to tackle and use that to force a fight, rather than anything else. And overall it's just made the like 30 to 50 man fleet fights that I personally really enjoy feel a lot more organic, and I hope this continues, even if I was on the losing side here. Alright, so that's my only bit of fleet footage. Now we're just going to take a look at some of the solo PvP that I've been able to get during the Blackout. And one of the things that I found most interesting about this is that people generally have adapted very, very quickly to the changes. Renters have either found ways to replace the intel security that local previously gave them, or even just found safer ways of ratting, as you can see here, by using cheaper ratting ships such as the Vexor instead of the Vexor Navy issue, which means it matters less if you actually are able to kill one, and also by using warp core stabilizers, which require you to use a specific ship, or else they'll just be able to moonwalk out of the anomaly, as you can see here. But I have to say, being able to regularly get on grid with a PvE ship without the use of a logon trap is a huge improvement to where PvE hunting was a couple of years ago when I tried it for the first time. Now, my absolute favourite experience that I had during the Blackout is the clip that you're going to see right now. And it starts with me warping from anomaly to anomaly, trying to find where this Vexor Navy issue that I can see on D-scan is, as I've decided not to use combat probes at this point, as I found people generally have them added to their overview so that they can see them on D-scan and warp out if they see them. And then after I do narrow it down and finally warp to the correct anomaly, I see that there's already a Loki in that exact same anomaly, probably with the exact same fit I have, and it's just finishing up killing the Vexor Navy issue. And you can see me hesitate for a moment there as I'm not sure what to do, before I eventually do decide to decloak and try and kill him, just because hey, why not? And whilst he's able to get away, this is just a unique experience. I've never, gone into an anomaly and found someone else trying to hunt in the same system and get a target before I do. And it really felt like a microcosm of what EVE had become during the Blackout, with tons of PvPers trying to kill off the relatively few PvEers that were brave enough to try and rat in a sub-capital during the event. In fact, there seems to be so many relatively unexperienced hunters flying around in Lokis like myself, that the Loki actually has reached its lowest efficiency point on Z-kill that it's had in multiple years, which indicates to me right now, kind of speculatively, that whilst there are more hunters out there, hunters are also dying more frequently, which I think is actually a great way to have things balanced. Anyway, if you're an elite PvPer, I would suggest that you close the video down now so that you don't have to see how this Loki dies, because quite honestly it dies to a really dumb mistake on my part. But I want to show that, it doesn't matter if you mess up and lose a ship, because pretty much everyone does that from time to time. And this actually starts in Providence with me seeing a badger that a Jaguar has tackled on a gate. So I warp off and warp back to it, attempting to get in at 0, because I think, I can probably make an impact there. I can either kill the Jaguar, or I can kill the badger, or I can kill whatever comes in to try and save the badger. Kind of the same mentality that I had when I was FCing that fleet of Vexors, just on a much smaller scale. By the time I actually get back onto the grid where the fight is taking place, I see that the Jaguar is trying to get out of the fight, and a Vexor and a Caracal have joined in the defense of the Badger. But, being in a Loki, I'm pretty sure that that's a fight I can take, especially given that the Caracal is probably through, half or so of its RLML charges, meaning it's not going to do DPS for 45 seconds of that fight. However, because I'm pretty bad at EVE, what ends up happening is that I don't really kite away from this properly, and I don't put my webs on the Vexor like I should have, which would have stopped it from being able to get in range to scram me and allowed me to kite around and probably kill the Caracal unmolested. And then I continue to just throw my spaghetti around for the entire remainder of the fight. I don't really take good advantage of the Tech 3's heat bonus, which allows me to overheat my invuln for most of the fight, theoretically, which would have added, 20 to 30% to my EHP and let me live long enough to probably kill the Badger. I also continue to shoot the Caracal, reasoning that it's probably the easiest target for me to kill, rather than what I should have done, which is switch immediately onto the Vexor, maybe swapping to Fusion, in order to make sure that I can break tackle and get away from the fight. And then, just to further seal my fate, another Caracal joins the fight, which increases the amount of DPS that's being put on me just as I go into armor, and that pretty much ensures that I'm going to die no matter what. And still, besides that, I waste a shot on the Vexor rather than trying to go down with an extra kill, having killed the Badger that was actually bait for the Jaguar. I eventually figured out during the fight, given that it had a scram and a web fit. Anyway, whilst this absolutely wasn't my finest hour as a solo PvPer, it was pretty fun, as you can see from my comment in local. And, I hope at some point I can learn from my mistakes like this and actually become a good solo PvPer, although I wouldn't put bets on it, if I'm honest. Alright, now that's the end of the video for today, but I do have one final segment to get on with, and that is the viewer questions. I didn't put those in the Sphere of Influence one because that video was already really long and I didn't want to add even more to it. But don't worry, I definitely didn't forget about them. And today we're going to be answering a question from GG Papa Pants, who asks, do you think that removing asset safety from Nullsec is a good thing or a bad thing? And that's a really complicated question, so I'm going to break it down into two real things, which is, do I think that the current iteration of asset safety is good? And the answer to that is absolutely no. I think that the current iteration of asset safety doesn't encourage people to actually fight over their space, because, you know, a 1 to 2.5% tax on losing your stations isn't going to really impact people. That's a lot less than what you had to do for fire sailing previously. But I also don't think that just straight up removing asset safety and going to a wormhole system in Nullsec would be good. I think that would be incredibly damaging for people. What I actually suggested to CCP on this kind of subject was that we have a asset safety in Nullsec which is locked down to the system where you lost your stuff. So you would be able to retrieve your assets, but you'd have to go in there and either, you know, park down an Astra house and try and sneak them out, or battle and try and take back the system and then put down proper infrastructure so that you could have access to all your assets again. And I know that's something that would be pretty controversial, but hey, let me know in the comments if that's something that you think would help with the game. Now, if you want your own question answered, feel free to leave it in the comments below, and maybe you'll be the lucky person that I choose to answer in my next video. But until then, as always, take care of yourself and fly smart.